Daniel Whitmore slammed the front door so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. His hands were shaking, his jaw was tight. And standing on his porch soaking wet luggage in hand, nowhere to go, was a woman he had never met before in his life. He could have said no. Every logical bone in his body told him to say no. Instead, he stepped aside and said, "Come in." That one decision changed everything. But what happened later that night when she quietly whispered 4 words outside his bedroom door? That's the part nobody saw coming. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, subscribe now because you do not want to miss where this goes. The storm rolled in fast that Thursday evening. The kind that didn't announce itself, didn't give people time to prepare. One moment the sky was gray and heavy. The next the wind was bending the old oak tree in Daniel Whitmore's front yard. Sideways, and rain was hammering the roof of his house like it had a personal grudge against it. Daniel wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about the casserole he had burned for the 3rd time that week, and whether his 9-year-old daughter Lily would notice if he quietly replaced it with drive-through chicken nuggets and called it dinner. "Dad," Lily said from the kitchen doorway, watching him stare at the smoking pan on the stove. "It smells like the time you forgot about the soup." "I didn't forget about the soup," Daniel said. "I was strategically letting it reduce." "It was on fire, Dad. It was lightly on fire." He set the pan in the sink, turned on the cold water, and watched the smoke spiral upward. "Go get your shoes. We're getting nuggets." Lily pumped her fist like she'd just won something important, which honestly she had. That was the rhythm of their life. Nothing dramatic. Nothing complicated. Daniel worked as a building contractor in a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina population. Just over 4,000 people, where everybody knew your truck, and half of them knew your business. He woke up early, dropped Lily at school, worked with his hands until his back ached, picked her up, made dinner or tried to, and then sat on the porch after she went to sleep, listening to the night until there was nothing left to think about. It was a good life, a quiet one. He had convinced himself that quiet was enough. He was standing at the sink, scraping the bottom of the casserole pan, when the knock came. Not a polite knock. Not the kind of knock that said, "Excuse me, sorry to bother you." It was the kind of knock that said, "I am standing in a monsoon, and I have run out of options." Daniel dried his hands on the dish towel, walked to the front door, and pulled it open. A woman stood on his porch. She was drenched from her hair, down to her shoes. Real shoes, not sneakers, the kind with a small heel that was absolutely not designed for standing in a North Carolina thunderstorm. She had a rolling suitcase beside her that had clearly seen better days, a tote bag over one shoulder that was dark with rainwater, and an expression on her face that was caught somewhere between exhaustion and the fierce refusal to look helpless. She was plus size with strong shoulders and a face that even soaked through and clearly at the end of her rope held something Daniel couldn't immediately name. Composure, maybe. Or the practiced look of someone who had learned to hold herself together in front of strangers, no matter what was happening underneath. She met his eyes directly. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was steady, even though she was shivering. "I know this is incredibly forward. My name is Emily Carter. I'm in town for the Maplewood Community Housing Initiative. I'm the project coordinator. My accommodations fell through about 40 minutes ago. The inn on Route 9 is fully booked, and the next available place is in Hendersonville, which is 40 minutes away in weather I'd genuinely rather not drive in." She paused, swallowed. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, I knocked on her door first. She told me you sometimes rent your guest room. She said you were a decent man." Daniel stared at her. He had never in his entire life rented his guest room to anyone. Mrs. Patterson, bless her 82-year-old soul, had invented that detail entirely on her own. "She said that," he said. "She did." A beat. Was she wrong? Daniel looked past Emily at the storm. A branch cracked somewhere down the road. Rain was sheeting sideways across his porch steps. I thought about the responsible answer. The safe answer. The answer that didn't involve letting a complete stranger into the house where his daughter slept. "Come in," he said, and stepped aside. Emily Carter was not what Daniel expected. He had made assumptions. He'd admitted that to himself later in the honest moments that come at 2 in the morning when you can't run from your own thoughts. He'd seen a woman soaked and desperate on his doorstep, and some part of his brain had already written a simple story. Fragile, overwhelmed, grateful. She was none of those things. Within 10 minutes of stepping through his front door, she had assessed the layout of his living room, identified the water stain on the ceiling in the hallway that he'd been meaning to fix for 6 months, noted that Lily's backpack by the door meant a child lived in the house, and immediately modulated her voice and posture accordingly. Nothing dramatic, just a slight softening that Daniel caught, and politely but firmly refused the guest room, until he assured her 3 separate times that it was not an inconvenience. "I don't want to displace anyone," she said, standing in the middle of his living room with her wet suitcase beside her. She had not sat down. She had not presumed. "You're not displacing anyone," Daniel said. "It's a guest room. It sits empty." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Because I can call in this storm." He looked at her. "Sit down, Ms. Carter." She sat. Not like someone relieved. Like someone deciding that sitting down was the logical and reasonable choice given the available data, and she was simply executing that decision. Lily appeared in the doorway, then barefoot in her pajamas, staring at Emily with the particular unblinking intensity of a child who has not yet learned to be subtle. "Who are you?" Lily said. "Lily," Daniel started. "Emily," Emily said, turning toward her. "Emily Carter. Your dad was kind enough to let me stay out of the rain." "You're really wet," Lily observed. "I am," Emily agreed. "I miscalculated the weather." Lily tilted her head. "Dad burns dinner sometimes. He miscalculates a lot too." Emily looked at Daniel. There was something at the corner of her mouth, not quite a smile, but close. "Good to know we have something in common," she said. Daniel showed her the guest room at the end of the hallway. It was clean. He kept it clean, some habit left over from a time when he thought he might have people visiting more often. A bed, a dresser, a small window that looked out at the side yard, and the old fence he kept meaning to repaint. What he did not show her, what he hadn't noticed until he turned on the light and looked up, was the dark stain spreading across the upper corner of the ceiling. Not new, but worse than the last time he'd looked. Emily followed his gaze. "Is that?" she started. "Fine," Daniel said automatically. "Then, I'll look at it in the morning." "It looks like it's been leaking for a while." "It has a character," he said. Emily looked at him. "It has a structural issue," she said, not unkindly. "I work in community housing. I know what a bad ceiling looks like." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "I'll fix it." "I know you will. But tonight." She glanced at the ceiling again. The stain had a dark, wet center. As if on cue, a single drop fell and landed precisely in the middle of the hardwood floor. Then another. They both looked at it. "Right," Daniel said. He brought her sheets for the couch. Emily refused the couch and said the chair in the living room was perfectly fine. They compromised on the couch. It was the first of many small negotiations that Daniel would later realize were the way Emily Carter moved through the world quietly, firmly, without drama, but also without giving an inch of ground she didn't choose to give. He brought her a towel, then a second one because her hair was still dripping. He made tea because it was the only thing that seemed appropriate, and he couldn't think of what else to do with his hands. She sat on his couch wrapped in a towel, holding a mug, and for a few minutes they didn't say anything. The storm hammered the windows. Lily had gone back to bed. The house settled around them. "Thank you," Emily said. "I mean it. I know this is strange." "It's fine," Daniel said. "You keep saying things are fine." He looked at her. "Force of habit." She smiled at that, a real one, small and wry. "Yeah, I know that habit." I was almost to his bedroom when she said it. Daniel had just done the last walkthrough of the house the way he always did. Checked the locks, checked on Lily, turned off the kitchen light, and he was in the hallway, almost to his door, when he heard Emily's voice behind him. He turned. She was standing at the entrance to the hallway, still holding her mug, looking toward his bedroom door. And then she looked at him, and something in her expression was different from the composed, measured woman who had stood on his porch. She was nervous. He could see it now, the slight set of her jaw, the way she held the mug with both hands. "Are we sharing tonight?" she asked. The words landed in the quiet of the hallway like something physical. Daniel stood completely still. For a moment, just a moment, he didn't understand what she was asking. His brain went somewhere it had no business going, and he felt heat move up the back of his neck, and then he noticed her expression more carefully. She wasn't being suggestive. She was testing something. There was something careful in her eyes. Watchful. Like a woman who had learned through years of being read the wrong way, assumed about misunderstood to watch people's faces very closely when she asked an unexpected question. Like she was waiting to see what kind of man he was. "The couch is fine," she said quickly before he could answer. I heard the ceiling in the guest room. It sounds like it's getting worse, and I figured I should ask instead of assume." A pause. "About sleeping arrangements. I'm a project coordinator. I deal with logistics." "Right," Daniel said. He took a slow breath. "No. You're on the couch. I'll look at the ceiling first thing in the morning." She nodded. "Okay. Get some sleep, Ms. Carter." "Emily," she said. He nodded. "Emily." He went to his room and closed the door and stood in the dark for a long moment. He had asked a simple logistical question, so why was his heart still beating the way it was? He did not sleep well that night. He lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. His ceiling, which was, thank God, intact, and thought about the question that wasn't what he'd first thought it was. About the look in her eyes when she'd waited for his answer. About the way she'd held herself on his porch soaking wet and refusing to look anything other than capable. He thought about Sarah. He always thought about Sarah when something shifted inside him. Some alarm in his chest he hadn't known was still running. Sarah had been his wife for 8 years before a car accident on I-26 had taken her without warning, without anything that felt like enough time to say what needed saying. Lily had been 3. He'd spent the years since then building walls he called stability and routine and responsibility, and he'd gotten very good at not examining them too closely. I was not looking for anyone. He had not been looking for anyone. But the woman on his couch was not a type or a category or a story he'd told himself. She was specific. She was Emily Carter, who had stood in a thunderstorm and refused to look desperate. Who had looked at his broken guest room ceiling and said structural issue instead of oh no. Who had asked a simple question and watched his face while she waited for the answer like she already knew what most people's faces did and was bracing for it. "What kind of man are you?" I didn't know if that's what she'd been asking, but it felt like it. I was up before 6. The storm had passed and left everything outside dark and wet and smelling like pine and mud. He made coffee, real coffee, not the gas station stuff he sometimes resorted to, and stood at the kitchen counter with his mug, thinking about the guest room. He'd need to pull the drywall. Probably replace the insulation. It wasn't a fast job, and it wasn't a cheap one, and it meant the room was unusable until it was done. Which meant Emily Carter, who had come to town for a 2-week community housing project, did not have a place to stay that wasn't his living room couch. He heard the couch creak. Then footsteps. Then Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair pulled back, wearing a gray sweater and dark slacks, looking completely put together in a way that made Daniel feel slightly embarrassed about his own situation, which involved a 15-year-old flannel shirt and coffee he'd made without measuring anything. "You're up early," he said. "I'm always up early," she said. "Is that coffee?" He poured her a mug without asking how she took it. Mistake, and then had to ask which she responded to with just black thank you, in a tone that suggested she had long since stopped expecting people to get it right. "I looked at the ceiling this morning," he said. She wrapped her hands around the mug. "How bad?" "Bad enough that you shouldn't sleep under it." Silence. "I can call around," she said. "There's the Hendersonville option." 40 minutes, he said. "I have a car. In the morning in the dark on Route 64, 40 minutes each way." "That's—" He stopped. She was looking at him with that watchful expression again. He tried a different angle. You said the project runs 2 weeks. 11 days, technically. That's a lot of 40-minute drives. She didn't say anything. The couch folds out, Daniel said. It's not glamorous, but it's not 40 minutes in the dark either. Emily looked at him for a long moment. He couldn't read her. She was very good at not being read. Why are you doing this? She asked. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't suspicious exactly. It was genuine, the question of someone who had learned that generosity usually came with a cost she hadn't seen yet. Daniel thought about it honestly before he answered. Because my neighbor lied about me renting a guest room, he said, and it turns out I think she made the right call. Something shifted in Emily's face. Not much, just a fraction. Okay, she said. 11 days. 11 days, he agreed. Lily came down at 7:15, hair in 2 uneven pigtails. She'd clearly done herself wearing a t-shirt that had a cartoon turtle on it, and said, "I'm not slow, I'm strategic." She stopped in the kitchen doorway and stared at Emily. "You're still here," she said. "Lily," Daniel said. "I'm still here," Emily agreed pleasantly. "The ceiling in the guest room needs repair. Your dad offered the couch. I hope that's okay with you." Lily considered this with the gravity of someone much older. "Do you eat breakfast?" "I do." "Dad makes good eggs," Lily said, "when he doesn't burn them." "I've heard he sometimes miscalculates," Emily said. Lily looked at her, then at her father, then back at Emily. Something in her small face decided something. "You can stay," she said in the tone of someone granting official permission. Then she pulled out a chair, sat down, and said, "Dad, eggs, please." Daniel caught Emily's eye across the kitchen. She was smiling, a real one with actual warmth in it, not the composed professional expression from the night before. And something in his chest did a thing it hadn't done in a very long time. He turned to the stove before she could notice. The 11 days didn't begin as anything more than a practical arrangement. Emily left the house by 8 each morning, drove to the Maplewood Community Center, where the housing initiative was headquartered, and worked the kind of hours that Daniel recognized from his own life, the hours of someone who didn't stop until the job was done. She came home in the evening, sometimes with notes spread across the kitchen table, sometimes on the phone with project partners, once with a look on her face that said the day had been harder than she was going to admit. He didn't pry. She didn't ask for much. She offered to help with dinner on the 3rd night, and he let her mostly because he was curious. She moved around a kitchen with quiet efficiency, no wasted motion, no fumbling for utensils, and produced a pasta dish that Lily ate 2 full portions of, and then looked at Daniel like he'd been holding out on her. "She's a better cook than you," Lily announced. "I know," Daniel said. "You should learn from her." "I'm working on it." Emily had her back to them at the sink, rinsing the pan. Daniel saw her shoulders shake once, a small, suppressed laugh. He filed that away. The way she laughed when she didn't mean to. The way she always rinsed what she used. The way she said good morning to Lily every day, with the same warmth, not performed, not trying too hard, just present. He started paying attention to things about Emily Carter. The way he paid attention to structural details in a building. Carefully. Looking for what held things together. On the 5th evening, he found her at the kitchen table at 10 o'clock, staring at a spreadsheet with an expression he recognized. He'd worn that face. He still wore it sometimes when the numbers from a job didn't add up and he couldn't figure out why. "Problem," he said. She looked up. "The community project funding has a gap. One of our partners backed out, not the money, just the labor commitment. I need to find volunteers for the construction phase, and I have 9 days. Daniel sat down across from her. "What kind of construction?" "Basic structural repairs. 8 houses in the Maplewood area. Elderly homeowners, some disabled residents. The kind of deferred maintenance that turns into real danger over time." She paused. "You're a contractor." "I am." "I'm not asking for charity," she said immediately. "I know you're not." He pulled the spreadsheet toward him and looked at it. "What's your timeline for the first house?" She watched him read for a moment. "You'd actually consider it." "I know half the guys in this county who owe me favors," he said. And my current job wraps up Friday. He looked at her. I'm not promising miracles, but I can probably find you 4 guys who know what they're doing. Emily was quiet. Then, why? He recognized the question, same one she'd asked at the beginning. Because it's the right thing to do, he said. And because... He stopped. Because what? He looked at her across the kitchen table, the spreadsheet between them, the house quiet around them. Because I think you've been carrying this alone, he said. And I don't think you should have to. The silence stretched. Emily looked down at the table. When she looked up again, something in her face was different, not broken, not soft in a way that felt like loss, just open, like a window someone had finally found the latch on. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. They sat there for another hour, going through the spreadsheet together. Daniel making calls on his phone that he absolutely did not have to make at 10:30 at night, and Emily reorganizing the project timeline, with the focused precision of someone who did not waste a single thing she'd been given. Daniel drove home, 2 of the volunteers himself the next morning, and watched from a distance, while Emily Carter walked into a house that was falling apart at the edges and started talking to an 80-year-old man named Charles, who hadn't had anyone willing to look at his roof in 4 years. She shook Charles's hand like he was a colleague. Not a charity case, not a project, a person. Daniel sat in his truck for a moment before getting out. He already knew he was in trouble. He just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. And that was only day 6. What happened on day 7 at the charity dinner Emily had organized would change everything between them. But before it changed things for the better, it almost broke her. Because not everyone in that room was there to celebrate what she'd built. And Daniel Whitmore would have to decide once and for all exactly what kind of man he was. Day 7 started the way the previous 6 had. Emily was gone before 8. The coffee was still warm, and Lily had left a drawing on the kitchen table before school. Daniel picked it up without thinking. 3 stick figures. A tall one, a small one, and one with curly hair and a smile wider than its face. He stared at it for a moment longer than he should have. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. He told himself it didn't mean anything. I was still telling himself that when he pulled up to the Maplewood Community Center at 9:15 with 4 guys in work trucks behind him, Ray and Bobby, who owed him from the Clemson Road job, and 2 brothers named Marcus and Trey, who worked fast and didn't complain. He had called in every favor he had, and he had done it without anyone asking him to. Emily was standing outside the center when they pulled up. She had a clipboard. She always had a clipboard. But when she saw the 4 trucks roll in behind Daniel's, she stopped walking mid-step. He got out of his truck and walked toward her. Told you I knew guys. She looked at the trucks, then at him. You said 4 people. There are 4 people. You didn't say you'd be one of them. He took the clipboard from her hand, looked at the project sheet, and handed it back. Charles's roof first. Trey's done 3 roof jobs this year alone. Bobby's your framing man. Ray and Marcus can handle the interior work at the Henderson's place on Birch. He looked at her. Or I can put them back in their trucks. Emily held the clipboard against her chest. Her jaw was tight, not angry. Something else. You didn't have to do this, she said. I know, he said. Where do you want us to start? She looked at him for another second. 2. Then she turned to the trucks and raised her voice. Charles Beaumont's property, 114 Maplewood Drive. I'll lead the way. The guys climbed back in their trucks. Daniel walked back to his. He heard her behind him. Daniel. He turned. Thank you, she said. And this time it didn't come out clipped or professional. It came out like something she'd had to work to say. Don't mention it, he said, and got in his truck. He drove the whole way to Charles Beaumont's house, telling himself this was just about doing the right thing. He almost believed it. Charles Beaumont was 81 years old and had lived in the same house for 53 years. He met them at the door in a collared shirt because he had been raised to dress properly when company came, even if the company was there to crawl around in his attic. He shook Daniel's hand. He shook all their hands. And then he pulled Daniel aside while the others were unloading equipment and said very quietly, That young woman from the project, she came and sat with me for 2 hours last Tuesday. Just sat with me. Didn't talk about the house once. Daniel looked at him. What did she talk about? Charles smiled. My wife. I haven't talked about Marion to anybody in almost a year. He patted Daniel's arm. That woman's got a good heart. I hope somebody knows it. Daniel looked across the yard to where Emily was talking to Trey, pointing at something on the roofline, completely focused. I think somebody's starting to, he said. Charles made a sound that might have been a laugh. Good. Now fix my roof before it rains again. Chatag. They worked until 4 in the afternoon. Daniel was on the roof for most of it. He always worked better when his hands had something to do, when the problem in front of him was concrete, measurable, solvable. You found the damage, you fixed it, you made it sound again. There was something honest about that. Emily worked the ground. She coordinated materials, answered calls, walked through the interior of the house with a tablet making notes, negotiated a delivery for the second job site, all without stopping, all without asking anyone for help she didn't need. At noon, she produced sandwiches. Not gas station sandwiches. Real ones from the deli on Center Street, wrapped in paper with the order right for every single person without having asked anyone's preferences a second time. She had listened the first time. She remembered. Ray, who was not a man easily impressed, looked at his sandwich and said, I like her. Eat your lunch, Ray, Daniel said. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. Ray grinned. Do you? Daniel climbed back up the ladder. They were packing up the trucks when Emily's phone rang. Daniel wasn't listening, or he wasn't meaning to listen, but he was close enough to catch the shift in her voice. She had been speaking in her project coordinator tone, steady, clear, efficient. Then something changed. The steadiness cracked just slightly, the way a floorboard sounds different when there's rot underneath. What do you mean the venue changed? She said. A pause. That room holds 40 people. We have 90 confirmed RSVPs. Another pause. I know you're sorry, I understand that, but the dinner is in 3 days and I... She stopped talking. Whoever was on the other end was talking. Daniel watched her face. She was standing very still, the clipboard at her side, and she was doing the thing he'd noticed she did when she was processing bad information. She went perfectly quiet, like she was rerouting internally, finding another path. Fine, she said. Her voice was controlled again, but tighter. I'll figure it out. She hung up. Daniel waited. Venue problem, she said without looking at him. I heard. The church hall they'd reserved for the fundraiser dinner, the one that was supposed to showcase the project. Bring in donors, secure funding for the second phase, they doubled booked it. She said it flatly. Some kind of scheduling error. They offered us a smaller room. How much smaller? Half the size. We'd have to cut the guest list. She finally looked at him. These are people who came specifically because the project director told them this would be a significant event. If I cut the list, I lose donors. If I lose donors, the second phase doesn't happen. If the second phase doesn't happen... She stopped, pressed her lips together. 16 families are waiting on the second phase. Silence. The crew had stopped pretending not to listen. Daniel thought for exactly 4 seconds. How big is the space you need? Something that holds at least 90, with room for a presentation setup. When? Saturday. He pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Emily said. Calling Phil Garner. He owns the Riverside Event Center on Route 9. It's closed on Saturdays in the off-season. I did his roof 2 years ago, and he still sends me Christmas cards. Emily stared at him. It's Wednesday. I know what day it is. He found Phil's number. I'm not promising anything. He walked to the side of the truck and called. Phil picked up on the third ring. The conversation lasted 7 minutes. Daniel did most of the listening, a little talking, and one moment where he said, Phil, it's for the community. You've got the space sitting empty. You know this is the right thing to do. He hung up and walked back to Emily. Saturday night, he said. Riverside Event Center. He's giving you the space free for the evening. He wants 2 tickets to the dinner. Emily looked at him. She didn't say anything. I know you're going to say you didn't ask for this, he started. I wasn't going to say that, she said. Her voice was quieter than usual. I was going to say, I don't know how to thank you. Daniel shrugged. Phil's the one doing the favor. You know that's not what I mean. He looked at her across the truck hood. The crew had gone politely, purposefully busy with their equipment. Yeah, he said. I know. That night something shifted, not dramatically. There was no moment Daniel could have pointed to and said there, that's when everything changed. It was quieter than that. It was Lily falling asleep on the couch between them while they were going over the revised event layout on the kitchen table, and neither of them moving her because she looked too peaceful. It was Daniel making coffee at 9:30 because neither of them was ready to stop talking. It was Emily, actually laughing. Not the professional half-smile, when Daniel told her about the time he'd accidentally nailed his own boot to a subfloor on a job site and had to call Ray to come pry him loose. You're not serious, she said. I was there for 45 minutes, he said. Ray brought a camera before he brought tools. She laughed again, and this time it stayed on her face. A real laugh, the kind that left something open afterward. Then she said quieter, Can I ask you something? Sure. Your wife. She said it carefully. You don't have to. Sarah, he said. It still costs something to say even now. 8 years ago, car accident. I'm sorry. Yeah. He wrapped both hands around his mug. Lily was 3. Doesn't really remember her, which is... He stopped. I don't know if that's mercy or the hardest part. Probably both. Emily nodded. She didn't rush to fill the silence, which he appreciated. Most people rushed. Do you think about starting over? She asked. Or does that question bother you? Doesn't bother me. I think about it sometimes. And then I think about all the reasons it's complicated. He looked at her. Lily, the routine, He stopped himself. The truth is, I think I got comfortable being careful. Careful, she repeated. Like if I don't risk anything, nothing bad happens again. Emily was quiet for a moment. That's not safety, she said finally. That's just a smaller life. He looked at her. She looked back. Sorry, that was... No, he said. It was honest. She wrapped her hands around her own mug. I've said that to myself 100 times, she said. About my own life. Doesn't make it easier to hear. What do you mean? She was quiet again. The kind of quiet that held something in it. I grew up being the smart one, she said. The funny one, the capable one, the one who organizes everything and remembers everyone's order and fixes the problems. A pause. And I figured out pretty young that people, men mostly, but not only men, people really like having someone like that around. They like the competence. They like the dependability. She turned her mug in her hands. What they don't always like is the whole person. Daniel was very still. Because of how you look, he said. She glanced at him, quick assessing that same watchful look from the hallway the first night. Checking his face. That's part of it. But it's not a simple thing. It's the assumption. The way someone looks at you and they've already written the story before you've said a word. She's probably this. She probably wants that. She's probably not. She stopped. Set the mug down. I've had people tell me they adore me. I've had people be genuinely fond of me. And then I've had the same people go choose someone else without a second thought, because somehow in the real calculus of their lives, I was always the version they chose in absence of something better. The house was quiet. Lily breathed slowly on the couch. That's not something I know how to fix, Daniel said. I can't undo what other people did. I'm not asking you to. What are you asking? She looked at him steadily. Nothing, she said. I'm just telling you the truth. You told me yours, I told you mine. She picked up the mug again. That's what people do when they actually trust each other, isn't it? He looked at her. Something in his chest was very loud. Yeah, he said. I think it is. The next 2 days before the dinner were controlled chaos, and Emily Carter was the eye of it. Daniel watched her work with the specific admiration of someone who understood what real skill looked like. She rebuilt the donor list, confirmed RSVPs, coordinated catering to the new venue, redesigned the presentation layout to fit the riverside space, handled 3 separate minor crises before noon on Friday, and still managed to be home by 6 to eat dinner with Daniel and Lily, like it was the most normal thing in the world. On Friday evening, Lily declared that Emily should wear her hair down for the dinner. "It's a fundraiser," Emily said, "not a birthday party." "You should still look pretty," Lily said with the conviction of someone who had very strong opinions about things. "Dad, tell her." Daniel, who had been very carefully staying out of this conversation, suddenly found himself in it. "I think whatever Emily is comfortable with is..." "Dad," Lily said. He looked at Emily. She was watching him with that expression, waiting to see what he'd do. "I think," he said carefully, "that you'd look good either way." He held Emily's gaze. But Lily might be onto something. Emily's mouth did that thing. Almost a smile. Not quite. "I'll consider it." "She'll wear it down," Lily told Daniel confidently. He was almost certain Lily was right. He was also not going to say that. Saturday evening. Daniel drove to the Riverside Event Center and arrived early to help with setup, because it turned out he was now apparently someone who helped with setup. He was moving tables when Emily arrived. He heard her before he saw her, the click of heels on the hardwood floor, and then someone near the door said something too quietly for him to catch, and then he looked up. She was wearing a deep burgundy dress. Her hair was down. She looked, the word that arrived in his mind without permission was radiant. Not because of the dress, not because of the hair, because of the way she was holding herself. Head up, shoulders back. The same composed posture she always had, but this time without any of the armor he'd learned to recognize. This time she looked like someone who had decided deliberately and consciously that tonight she was showing up as herself. He set down the chair he was holding. She crossed the room to him. "You're early," she said. "I told Phil I'd help with the tables." "You didn't have to." "Emily," he said. She stopped. "You look beautiful," he said. He said it simply, the way he'd say something was well built or well made, as a plain statement of fact that required no decoration. She looked at him for a moment. "Thank you," she said. And then quieter. "I'm nervous." "I know." "I don't get nervous," she said. "I know that too." She inhaled. "A lot of important people are coming tonight. People who could fund the second phase or kill it with one conversation." She looked around the room, the tables, the flowers. Someone had arranged the presentation screen at the front. "I just need tonight to go right." "It will," he said. "You don't know that." "No," he agreed. "But I know you, and you've been building toward this for 2 weeks. This goes right because you made it go right." He picked up the chair again. "Now let me finish with these tables." She watched him for a second. Then she went to work. The dinner began well. The room filled with exactly the right energy, conversation, the clink of glasses, the hum of people who had come with checkbooks and open minds. Emily worked the room the way she did everything, with precision and warmth, remembering names, asking the right questions, pivoting from conversation to conversation with the kind of ease that looked natural and wasn't. Daniel stayed to the side. He was not a donor, not a project stakeholder. He was there because she'd handed him a ticket when Phil had asked for 2, and when he'd said she should give the second ticket to someone useful, she'd said, "You are someone useful. You're the reason there's a room to be in." He watched her work. He watched the way she lit up when she talked about the families the project was helping. He watched the way she made Charles Beaumont, who had come in his best collared shirt, feel like the most important man in the room. He watched people lean toward her in conversation, drawn in by something she carried that wasn't performance. It was conviction. It was the specific energy of someone who actually believed in the thing they were fighting for. He watched other people watch her too, and he watched the moment when some of them stopped seeing Emily Carter, the project coordinator, the woman who organized the room, and started seeing Emily Carter through a different lens. The shift was small and ugly, and he recognized it the second he saw it. A group near the bar, 2 men and a woman glancing toward Emily, and then back to each other with the kind of private expressions that didn't need words. He knew those expressions. He had never had them directed at him. But he knew what they meant. They meant they had decided something about her without asking. His jaw tightened. He made himself stay where he was. This was her event. His instinct was to walk over and say something, but this wasn't about him, and he knew better than to make a scene at a fundraiser over a look on someone's face. But then he saw Emily notice. She was mid-sentence with a donor when her eyes flicked toward the group at the bar, and something in her posture shifted, not much, not enough for the donor to notice. But Daniel noticed. The way someone straightens their spine when they're bracing for something. The way warmth becomes professional. The practiced retreat. She finished the conversation beautifully. She always finished beautifully. And then she excused herself and walked toward the hallway at the back of the room. Daniel set down his glass and followed. He found her in the corridor outside the main hall, standing with her back to the wall, arms crossed looking at the middle distance. Not crying. Emily Carter was not a woman who cried in public corridors at her own events. But she was somewhere internal, somewhere behind the composure, and the door to that place was visible if you knew how to look. "Hey," Daniel said. She looked at him. "I'm fine." "I know you are," he said. He leaned against the wall beside her, not facing her, just next to her. "But you stepped out." "I just needed a minute." "Okay." He didn't push, he just stayed. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "There are people in there who came to see the project. Really came to see it. Charles is in there right now talking to a man who might fund 3 more houses, and he's doing it better than I could." She paused. "And then there are people in there who looked at me and—" She stopped. "I saw," Daniel said. She looked at him. "I saw," he said again. "And I want you to know it had nothing to do with you. Nothing you did, nothing you are. It's a failure of theirs, not yours." "I know that," she said. Her voice was flat. "I've known that for 20 years. Knowing it doesn't make it—" She pressed her lips together. "I'm 32 years old, and I still have to remind myself in hallways at my own events that other people's smallness is not my problem." "That's not a small thing to carry," he said. "No," she said. "It's not." They stood there for a moment. The noise of the dinner floated in from the other room. "What do you need?" he said. She looked at the floor, then at him. "Nothing. I'm fine. I just needed 60 seconds. "You've had 45, he said. "Take the full minute." Something broke through in her face, a laugh she hadn't planned on. Small, real, involuntary. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. "You're annoying," she said. "My daughter says the same thing." She dropped her hand, took a breath, squared her shoulders, that deliberate conscious squaring that he now recognized as Emily Carter, deciding to be Emily Carter no matter what the room was going to do. "Okay," she said. "Let's go back in." They walked back into the dinner. Together. And Daniel didn't think about what it looked like. He just walked beside her, and when they came back into the room, the few heads that turned got a plain, clear view of Daniel Whitmore standing at Emily Carter's side, like there was nowhere else he had any interest in being. He didn't make a speech. He didn't call anyone out. He didn't do anything dramatic. He just made sure that when Emily walked back into her own event, she didn't walk back in alone. The night turned. It was one of those rare things, a moment when the whole current of an evening changes direction, and everyone in the room feels it without knowing why. Emily stepped back in and took the floor, and she was different from the woman who had retreated to the hallway. Not harder. Something better than hard. Clearer. She spoke about the project with the specific personal detail that only comes from someone who has sat with Charles Beaumont for 2 hours, talking about his wife Marion, who knows the name of the family at the Birch Street house, and why their porch steps matter. She didn't talk numbers first. She talked about people, and then she talked numbers, and they were extraordinary. When she was done, the room was quiet for a second. The specific quiet of people recalibrating what they'd walked in expecting, and then it filled with applause. Charles Beaumont, in his best collared shirt, clapped the hardest of anyone. Daniel stood in the back of the room and watched her. This, he thought. This is who she is. Not the woman on his porch in the rain. Not the woman with the clipboard and the spreadsheets and the controlled efficiency. Not even the woman laughing at his stories about nailing his boot to a floor. All of it. All of it at once. And he had spent 6 years building walls and calling them responsibility. He had spent 6 years telling himself that protection was the same as living. Standing in the back of the Riverside Event Center on a Saturday night in a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina, watching Emily Carter command a room full of donors because she had earned every inch of it. Daniel Moore understood with a clarity that was almost physical that he had been wrong. A smaller life was still a smaller life, no matter how clean you kept it. Howe was still standing there when Emily found him 40 minutes later as the room was beginning to thin. Her heels were in her hand. She was in her socks. She had a glass of water and that quiet, real expression she only wore when she wasn't performing anything. "We got 3 major commitments," she said. "The second phase is funded." "I know," he said. "I saw your face when the third one came in." She laughed softly. Was it obvious? Only to someone watching. She looked at him. "You were watching." "I was watching," he said. The room murmured around them. Someone was stacking chairs. Phil Garner was shaking hands by the door. Charles was telling someone a story that involved a lot of arm movement and appeared to be going very well. "Daniel," Emily said. He looked at her. "I don't do this," she said. I don't lean on people. I don't let people into my plans. I don't—" She stopped, started again. "I've gotten very good at not needing anything from anyone." "I know," he said. "And then I knocked on the wrong door in a rainstorm, and a man let me in, even though he had no reason to." She looked at him steadily. "And he's been—" She exhaled. "You've been kind in a way I didn't expect. Genuinely kind. And I need you to know I see it." The room around them had grown quieter. "Emily," he said. "I'm not—" She shook her head. "I'm not saying this because of the venue or the volunteers or any of it. I'm saying it because you walked back into that room with me tonight, and you didn't think about how it looked, or what it meant, or—" "I thought about how it looked," he said. She stopped. "I thought about exactly how it looked," he said. "And I walked in anyway." Silence. She looked at him with that look, the one from the first night in the hallway, waiting to see what kind of man he was. Except this time, she wasn't bracing for the answer. This time she already had it. "Okay," she said softly. She looked down at the heels in her hand, then back at him. "Okay." They stood there for a moment in the thinning noise of the room. Neither of them said anything else. Neither of them had to. The drive home from the Riverside Event Center was quiet in the way that only happens between two people who have said something important without using the right words yet. Emily had her shoes back on. Daniel had both hands on the wheel. The radio was off. Neither of them reached for it. Lily was at a sleepover at her friend Madison's house, first time in months. Daniel had let her, and he'd only agreed because Madison's mother Karen had called personally and sworn on 3 separate occasions that the girls would be asleep by 10. He was about 70% sure that was a lie, but he'd said yes anyway, and now the house they were driving back to was going to be quiet in a way it almost never was. He was acutely aware of that. He suspected Emily was too. They pulled into the driveway and got out, and he unlocked the front door, and they walked in, and he turned on the kitchen light, and the ordinary reality of his house settled around them. Lily's turtle t-shirt folded on the back of the couch, a coffee mug he hadn't washed sitting by the sink, the sound of the refrigerator humming. Normal. Familiar. Completely unchanged from every other night. Except nothing felt the same at all. "Tea," he said. "Sure," she said. He put the kettle on. She sat at the kitchen table. He stood at the counter with his back to her and thought about the fact that 20 minutes ago he had told her he had walked back into that room knowing exactly how it looked, and she had said okay, in a voice he was still hearing. He turned around. She was looking at her hands on the table. "Emily," he said. She looked up. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I need you to answer honestly. When have I ever not answered honestly? Fair point." He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. That question you asked me the first night. In the hallway. She was very still. Are we sharing tonight? He said. Not a question, repeating it like he was working something out. I told you what that was, she said. I know what you told me. I'm asking what it actually was. She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, something rustled in the yard. A branch, the wind, something ordinary. The kettle was starting to heat. Both things, she said finally. It was both things. He held her gaze. Okay. Okay. She tilted her head. That's it. That's it, he said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost something else. You're not going to make this complicated. I've been making it complicated for 8 days, he said. I'm done with complicated. She looked at him across the table, and he looked back, and the kettle began to whistle, and neither of them moved for a full 3 seconds. Then she said, Daniel, I leave in 3 days. He got up and took the kettle off the burner. I know. I live in Charlotte. That's 2.5 hours from here. I know that too. So what are you saying? He poured the water, set the mugs on the table, sat back down. I'm saying I've spent 6 years making decisions based on what was safe. I'm saying I'm not interested in doing that anymore. He looked at her. I'm not asking you to stay. I'm not asking you to change anything. I'm telling you that whatever this is, I don't want to pretend it isn't there. The silence between them was full. I've been told I'm easy to like, Emily said slowly. And hard to choose. Then the people who told you that by leaving were idiots, he said. Flat, simple. She blinked. I'm not trying to be romantic, he said. I'm being accurate. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her mug, wrapped both hands around it, and said very quietly, I've been sitting in this kitchen for over a week telling myself that what I felt was gratitude. Was it? Some of it. And the rest? She met his eyes. You already know the answer to that. He did. Okay. They talked until after midnight. Not about what happened next. Not about Charlotte or Asheville or 2.5 hours of highway. They talked the way people talk when they've been holding things back, and suddenly the reason for holding back is gone freely, without calculating the cost about things that mattered and things that didn't, and the unclear space between. Daniel told her about the job he'd almost taken in Raleigh, the year after Sarah died, the one that would have paid twice what he made, and how he'd turned it down, because moving felt like leaving something behind. Even though the thing he was leaving behind was a grave marker and a memory, and not anything he could carry with him anyway. He'd never told anyone that. He'd told himself it was because of Lily's school and his established clients, and a dozen practical reasons that were all technically true. You stayed because it felt like betrayal, Emily said, not a question. Yeah, he said, even though that's irrational. It's not irrational, it's grief. She turned her mug. Grief makes staying feel like loyalty. Moving feel like abandonment. It's not logical, it's just how it works. He looked at her. You sound like you know it. I lost my mother when I was 24, she said, quietly. Breast cancer. Took 8 months. She paused. I know exactly what it feels like to turn down perfectly good things, because accepting them feels like agreeing that life goes on. Does it? He said. Get easier. No, she said. You just get better at carrying it. I thought about that. Thought about 6 years of carrying it the way he carried most heavy things alone without asking for help, because asking felt like admitting something was wrong. Lily draws pictures, he said, not sure why he was saying this. She drew 3 stick figures last week, left it on the kitchen table. He looked at his hands. I folded it and put it in my pocket. Emily was very still. She drew you with curly hair, he said. The silence was different now, softer. She's a good kid, Emily said. She's the best thing I've ever done, he said. And some days that feels like enough. And some days it feels like... He stopped. Like you're lonely, Emily said. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She nodded once. Yeah, she said. I know that one too. I was clearing the mugs at 12:30 when his phone lit up on the counter. He glanced at it, Karen's name on the screen, and felt the particular cold that every parent feels when someone calls about their kid at midnight. He grabbed it. Karen. Hey Daniel, I'm sorry to call so late. Karen's voice was calm, which meant not emergency. He exhaled. Lily's fine, she's fine. But she's crying and she won't tell me why and she's asking for you. I think she just got homesick. First sleepover jitters. You know how it is. He was already reaching for his keys. I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said. He hung up and looked at Emily. Lily. I heard. Go. She was already standing. I'll lock up. He hesitated for exactly 1 second. You'll be here when I get back. She looked at him. Something in her face was quiet and certain. I'll be here, she said. He went. Lily was sitting on Karen's couch in her pajamas, red-eyed, clutching a stuffed elephant named Gerald that she would deny owning in any context outside of bedtime. She looked up when Daniel came through the door, and her face did the thing that hit him every single time. The immediate total relief of a kid who had been waiting for the specific person who made everything okay. He sat down next to her, and she leaned into his side without a word. You okay, Bug? He said. She shook her head against his arm. What happened? She was quiet for a moment. Then, I just wanted to go home. Okay, he said. Let's go home. She nodded. He helped her gather her things. He thanked Karen, who was gracious about it, in the way of a woman who had been through this herself. He carried Lily to the truck because she was tired, and he could, and she fell asleep against his shoulder before he'd even started the engine. He drove home with one hand on the wheel, and his daughter's head heavy against his arm, and he thought about what Emily had said. About loneliness. About carrying things. He thought about the folded stick figure drawing in his shirt pocket from 3 days ago, the one he'd never taken out. He thought about what it meant that Lily had drawn 3 figures, and not 2. Emily was awake when they got back. She was at the kitchen table not doing anything, just sitting with her hands folded, and when Daniel came in carrying Lily, she stood up immediately and held open the hallway door without being asked. He took Lily to her room, got her shoes off, tucked her in, stood at the door for a moment, listening to her breathing even out. He went back to the kitchen. Emily was washing the mugs. She okay? Emily asked. Homesick, he said. She's fine now. Emily nodded and handed him a dry mug to put away. They stood there for a moment in the kitchen, doing ordinary things, putting away cups, wiping down the counter. And Daniel thought about the fact that this felt so natural it scared him. Not the dangerous kind of scared. The kind of scared that means something is real. Emily, he said. She turned. He held her gaze. Stay. She looked at him. Not tonight, he said quickly. I'm not. He stopped and tried again. Stay. After the project ends. Don't just drive back to Charlotte and let this... He gestured between them. I don't want this to be something that happened in a week and then stopped. She was very still. You have a life in Charlotte, she said. I have a job, an apartment. I know. You have Lily. You have your business. You're established here. I know all of that, he said. Then what are you asking? I'm asking you to not decide it's impossible before we even try, he said. That's it. That's the whole ask. She looked at him for a long time, long enough that he didn't know which way it was going to land. Then she said, I have another project, in the Western region. It starts in 6 weeks. A pause. Asheville is in the Western region. He absorbed this. Are you telling me that coincidentally, or... I'm telling you I already knew about it when I got here, she said. And I hadn't decided whether to take it. She looked at him steadily. I'm deciding now. The kitchen was very quiet. Take the project, he said. She nodded once. Okay. Nothing exploded. Nothing shifted dramatically. But something settled like a piece of something that had been leaning against a wall finally found its footing. Okay, he said. She reached past him to hang the dish towel on the oven handle. You should sleep, Daniel. It's almost 1 in the morning. You too. She picked up her bag from the chair. Paused. Thank you for tonight. For, she stopped. For walking back into the room with me. Any time, he said. She nodded and went down the hall to the living room, and he stood in the kitchen for a moment, and then he did something he hadn't done in longer than he could remember. He smiled, just standing there alone in his kitchen at 1 in the morning. He smiled like an idiot. Sunday moved differently from the days before it. No project site, no early departure, no clipboard or spreadsheets or calls to navigate. Emily was still there when Daniel came downstairs at 7:30, sitting on the porch with coffee watching the yard. Lily was still asleep, recovered from her late night, and the morning had that particular wide-open quality of a day, with nothing required of it. Daniel brought his coffee outside and sat in the other chair. They didn't say good morning. They didn't need to. They just sat. After a while, Emily said, "Tell me about Sarah, if you want." He considered the question. He didn't usually want, but this was different. She was funnier than me, he said. Sharper. The kind of person who could make a room comfortable without trying. Lily has her eyes. He paused. She wanted a second kid. We were talking about it when... He stopped. The accident was on the Wednesday, an ordinary Wednesday. She was coming home from the grocery store. Emily said nothing. She just let him talk. I was at a job site, he said. I got the call and I thought it was a mistake. I thought... He shook his head. I drove to the hospital telling myself it was a mistake the whole way there. That's the part they don't warn you about, Emily said quietly. The drive, before you know for certain. He looked at her. 8 months, she said. My mother. But there's still that moment in the middle of the night when you get the call and you drive and you spend the whole drive bargaining. Yeah, he said. That's exactly what it is. Bargaining. They sat with that for a moment. I think, Emily said slowly, that people who've lost somebody, really lost somebody, they recognize each other, not by what they say, by what they don't say. She turned her mug. You didn't rush to fill the silence the first night I told you about the way people see me. Most people rush. They fix. They problem solve. You didn't need fixing, he said. No, she said. I didn't. But most people can't resist trying. She looked at him. You just sat there, and that was... She stopped. What? He said. Everything, she said simply. That was everything. He looked at his coffee. After a moment, he said, You do that too. You don't fill the silence when I talk about Sarah. No, she said. Why? Because, she said, I know that the silence is where the real stuff lives. And rushing through it is the same as telling someone their grief has an expiration date. He was quiet. She sounds like she was extraordinary, Emily said. She was, he said. She really was. He looked across the yard. She was, he said. She really was. He looked across the yard. She would have liked you. Emily went still. Don't say that if you don't mean it. I mean it, he said. She had no patience for people who performed things. You're one of the least performative people I've ever met. He looked at her. She would have respected the hell out of you. Emily didn't answer for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. That might be the kindest thing anyone has said to me in a long time. It's just true, he said. Lily came out at 9, still in pajamas, hair chaotic. Gerald the elephant tucked under one arm and found 2 adults sitting in chairs on the porch, looking quietly at the yard. She assessed the situation with her 9-year-old's precision. Are you guys talking? She said. We were, Daniel said. We're done. Did you talk about me? Everything is about you, Lily, Emily said. Lily considered this and appeared satisfied. I'm hungry. Your father makes good eggs, Emily said. When he doesn't burn them. She's being generous, Daniel said, standing up. Can Emily make eggs? Lily said. Emily can make eggs, Emily confirmed. Okay, Lily said. Emily makes eggs. Dad watches. Story of my life, Daniel said. He held the door open. Lily walked through. Emily followed. Daniel stood in the doorway for 1 second before going in. I thought about what it would feel like when she was gone. when the house went back to 2 stick figures instead of 3. Then he thought about 6 weeks, about the Western Region project, about a woman who had already known about it when she knocked on his door in the rain. He went inside. The last 3 days before Emily's departure arrived with a speed that felt deliberate, like the universe had decided to test something. Monday was the final wrap-up for the Maplewood project. Emily spent 12 hours at the community center, and Daniel picked up Lily from school and made dinner. Actually made it no burning because he'd been practicing and wasn't willing to admit that, and kept a plate warm without being asked. Emily came home at 8:15 and found the warm plate on the stovetop and Lily at the table doing homework, and she set down her bag and looked at the plate and then at Daniel and said, "You didn't have to." "I know," he said. "Eat." She ate. Lily narrated her entire school day in real time. Emily asked questions about each part with genuine interest, and Lily answered with increasing enthusiasm, and Daniel sat across from them and thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Tuesday, Emily sat at the kitchen table going through the project closeout documents. Daniel was doing billing for his own jobs. They worked in the same space for 4 hours without talking much, and it was the most comfortable 4 hours he'd had in years. Lily did her homework between them, and at one point she looked up and said without context, "I don't want Emily to leave." Emily's pen stopped moving. Daniel looked at his daughter. "She has work," he said carefully. "She should do work here," Lily said. "It's not always that simple, Bug." Lily looked at Emily directly. "Are you coming back?" Emily put down her pen. She looked at Lily with the full, honest attention she gave everything. "Yes," she said. "I'm coming back." "You promise?" "I promise." Lily looked at her for one more second like she was taking the measure of the word. Then she went back to her homework. Emily glanced at Daniel. He looked back at her. Neither of them said anything. But something had shifted in the room, and they both felt it, and it had nothing to do with them. It had to do with a 9-year-old girl who had drawn 3 stick figures and known something that the adults in the room had taken 8 days to admit. Wednesday morning came the way last days always do, too fast, and somehow also inevitable, like you'd seen it coming the whole time and refused to believe it would actually arrive. Emily had her suitcase by the door. Same suitcase as the night she'd arrived, now somewhat less battered looking, because she'd fastened the side buckle that had been broken. Her tote bag was over her shoulder. She was dressed for the drive, practical, comfortable, completely herself. Lily had cried at breakfast. Not dramatically, just gone quiet, and then had tears running down her face while she ate her cereal. And when Daniel had asked what was wrong, she'd said, I know she's coming back," like she was arguing with herself. And Emily had gotten up from her chair and come around the table and hugged her without saying anything, and Lily had hugged back hard. Daniel had looked away. He had things in his chest he wasn't prepared to deal with in front of breakfast cereal. Now they were at the front door. Lily had already said her goodbye and retreated to her room. She'd said very firmly that she was not watching the car drive away, which Daniel respected completely. Emily stood at the door with her suitcase. "The ceiling in the guest room is fixed," Daniel said. "I know, I saw." She looked at him. "You did good work." "I usually do." "I know that too." She held the strap of her tote bag. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, he said. "The project starts the second week of October. I'll know the exact date by Friday. Text me when you know." She nodded. He looked at her. He had about 15 things he wanted to say, and approximately 0 of them felt adequate, and he'd made a decision sometime around midnight the night before, that he wasn't going to perform something for the sake of a good goodbye. He was going to say the true thing. "Emily," he said. "Yeah, the week before you came I burned the same casserole 3 times. I told myself I liked things quiet. I told myself routine was enough." He held her gaze. "You showed up in a storm I wasn't expecting, and in 11 days you made my house feel more like a home than it has in 6 years. He paused. "I just want you to know that. Not because I want you to feel guilty for leaving, because I want you to know what you're worth. In case nobody's been clear about it." She looked at him. And for the first time, the very first time in all 11 days, Emily Carter looked like she didn't know what to do with her hands. Like the composure she wore so well had momentarily forgotten where it lived. She stepped forward and put her arms around him. He held her. She was solid and warm and real, and she smelled like the same soap she'd used since the first morning, and he felt her exhale against his shoulder. A long, slow exhale that sounded like putting something down. 6 weeks, she said against his shoulder. 6 weeks, he said. She stepped back, picked up her suitcase, opened the door, looked back once. "Don't burn the casserole," she said. "I'll try," he said. She walked to her car. He stood in the doorway and watched her go. When the car turned out of the driveway and disappeared down the road, he stood there for another moment. Then he went inside. Lily was in the hallway. She'd watched from the window. She didn't say she hadn't. "She promised," Lily said. Yeah, Daniel said. "She keeps promises," Lily said. It wasn't a question. Daniel looked at his daughter. Thought about a woman who had answered a 9-year-old's direct question with a direct answer. Who hadn't hedged or softened or qualified. Who had looked at Lily like she was worth the truth. "Yeah," he said. "She does." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Okay." She went back to her room. Daniel stood in the hallway of his house. The house was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the quiet of something absent. The quiet of something held, like a room waiting with the light on for someone to come back. He found the note on the kitchen table at noon. He didn't know when she'd written it, sometime in the early morning, probably before anyone else was up. It was on a piece of paper from her project notepad in her handwriting, which was neat and precise and completely Emily. It said, "The third stick figure had curly hair. I noticed. Thank you for folding it and keeping it. E." He read it twice. Then he folded it and put it in his shirt pocket, right next to the drawing. 6 weeks was 42 days. He knew because Lily informed him of this calculation approximately 6 hours after Emily left, and continued to provide updates every few days, unsolicited, with the focused energy of someone counting down to something important. Daniel didn't count. Or he told himself he didn't. He worked. He picked up Lily. He made dinner, getting better at it, genuinely better, which he attributed to paying attention, and which Lily attributed to Emily's influence without hesitation. He fixed 2 jobs he'd been putting off. He went to Ray's on a Thursday evening and had a beer and told Ray nothing specific, which meant Ray somehow knew everything and had the decency to mostly not comment. "She coming back?" Ray asked. "Yeah," Daniel said. "Good," Ray said. That was the entire conversation. On day 31, Emily texted him a photo. No message. Just a photo of a house unremarkable from the outside, somewhere in the Asheville area, clearly in need of work, with a front porch that sagged slightly on the left side. He texted back, "Porch needs new supports. I can fix that." She replied, "I know. That's why I sent it." He stared at his phone. Then he texted, "Is this a future project site or are you showing me something else?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. She wrote both. He set his phone down on the workbench, picked it up again, wrote, "I'll bring Ray." She wrote, "Bring Trey too. That porch needs at least 3 people." He wrote, "See you in 11 days. She wrote 11 days. And in his empty workshop with sawdust on his boots and his daughter's math test pinned to the bulletin board above his workbench and the folded note in his breast pocket. Daniel Whitmore put his phone in his pocket and went back to work. Not because there was nothing else to feel. Because there was everything else to feel, and he wasn't running from any of it anymore. 11 days felt different from 6 weeks. 6 weeks had been distance manageable, countable, something you put your head down and worked through. 11 days was close enough to feel. Close enough that Daniel caught himself checking his phone at job sites for no reason, and stopped and checked it again anyway. Emily had texted him the project address on a Tuesday morning. He'd looked it up on the county map. 14 minutes from his house. He hadn't mentioned that to anyone. Ray had somehow found out anyway. 14 minutes, Ray said on a Thursday, handing Daniel a wrench without looking up from the pipe fitting they were working on. "I didn't tell you that," Daniel said. "Bobby told me." I didn't tell Bobby. Marcus told Bobby. Daniel stopped working. How does Marcus know? Ray finally looked up. He had the expression of a man who found the entire situation deeply entertaining and was only partially concealing it. Because you looked up the address on your phone at the Henderson job, and Marcus saw the map, and he knows that neighborhood. Ray went back to the fitting. 14 minutes. That's not a coincidence, Daniel. She's on a project. I didn't pick the address. But you looked it up. Daniel didn't answer. Ray grinned. 14 minutes, he said again, like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Daniel picked up his wrench and went back to work and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse. Emily arrived on a Friday. Not at his house at the project site, which was a rental property on Caldwell Street that the Western Region Initiative was using as its base of operations. Daniel knew this because she'd told him the address. He had not driven past it. He had thought about driving past it and decided that was absurd. She texted him at 6:47 that evening. Arrived. Hotel is fine. First site walk tomorrow morning. He wrote back. How's the hotel? She wrote, it has a working ceiling. He wrote high bar. She wrote, you said it. He stared at his phone. Lily was at the kitchen table behind him, working on a history project about the American Revolution, periodically asking questions he didn't always know the answer to, which she found unacceptable for a grown adult. Dad, Lily said. Is that Emily? She just got in, he said. Lily put down her pencil. Can we see her this weekend? She's got a site walk tomorrow morning. After the site walk. He looked at his daughter. She was watching him with her mother's eyes and her own particular brand of 9-year-old certainty, and he had long since learned that arguing with that combination was a waste of time. He texted, Emily, Lily wants to know if you're free Saturday afternoon. The response came back in 40 seconds. Tell Lily yes. He showed Lily the screen. She pumped her fist exactly the same way she had the night he'd said they were getting nuggets instead of casserole. Saturday arrived with the specific energy of something anticipated, and Daniel handled it the way he handled most things that made him feel something by being productive. He fixed the fence post that had been leaning since August. He cleaned the truck. He made Lily's lunch without being asked and did not burn anything, which Lily acknowledged with a solemn nod. At noon, Emily texted, site walk ran long. Can we push to 2? He texted back. Fine. At 1:45, leaving now. Should be 14 minutes. He looked at that text for a second. Then he smiled. She had looked up the distance too. She arrived at 1:59. He watched from the kitchen window, not obviously just as a natural consequence of standing in the kitchen as her car pulled into the driveway. She got out. She was in work clothes, practical, her hair pulled back, and she looked exactly like she had the morning she'd left 6 weeks ago, and simultaneously like someone he was seeing clearly for the first time. The front door opened before he reached it because Lily had heard the car. Emily. Lily hit the porch at a speed that suggested she had been positioned near the door for some time. Emily actually caught her because Lily had launched and held her for a moment, and when she set her down, she was laughing. You got taller, Emily said. Dad says I grew an inch in 6 weeks, Lily said. He measured me on the doorframe. Emily looked up at Daniel, who was standing in the doorway. You measured her on the doorframe. She asked me to, he said. He does it every 6 months, Lily said. There's a whole chart. You should see how much I grew in 2nd grade. It was a lot. Emily walked up the porch steps. She stopped 1 step below him, which put them at eye level. Hi, she said. Hi, he said. She looked at him steadily. He looked back. You look good, she said. You look tired, he said. She laughed. The site walk was brutal. 3 houses with issues nobody flagged in the initial assessment. She stepped past him into the house. He caught the same soap, the same presence, the particular realness of a person who had been a voice in a phone and a name on a screen for 6 weeks, and was now standing in his living room again. Lily was already pulling her toward the kitchen. Come see the doorframe chart, she said. Daniel closed the front door. He stood there for 1 second by himself. Okay, he thought. Okay. Emily stayed for 4 hours on Saturday. They ate lunch. Daniel had made chili, and it was good, and he did not mention how many times he'd practiced it, and Lily told Emily everything that had happened in 6 weeks with the focused intensity of someone who had been saving the details. Emily listened to all of it, asked questions about all of it, remembered the names of Lily's classmates from conversations weeks earlier, and asked follow-up questions about each of them, which made Lily's eyes go wide with the pleasure of being genuinely paid attention to. After lunch, Lily disappeared to her room to finish the Revolution project, and Daniel and Emily sat at the kitchen table with coffee and the quiet of the house around them. It was where they'd sat that first week. Same table, same 2 chairs, same kitchen, different everything else. "How's the project looking?" he said. "Complicated," she said. "The funding is solid," the dinner carried through, "but the scope is bigger than the initial survey suggested. We're looking at 12 houses instead of 8. She turned her mug. "And I'm short on skilled labor again." He looked at her. "I wasn't going to ask," she said. "I know," he said. "When does the work start?" She looked at him carefully. "You just picked up a new job." "I have 2 crews," he said. "One on the Hendersons' commercial job, one I can redirect." He held her gaze. "When does the work start?" She was quiet for a moment. "Monday." "I'll bring Ray," he said. "Daniel. Emily." He leaned forward slightly. "Let me help. Not because I want something. Not because you're staying here and I feel obligated. Because I'm good at this, you need it, and turning down a practical solution because of pride is something both of us need to stop doing." She looked at him for a long moment. "Both of us," she said. "I've been known to be proud about things I should have asked for help with," he said. "It's a flaw. I'm working on it." The corner of her mouth. That thing she did. "Monday," she said. 7:30. "We'll be there at 7, he said. "Because Ray is constitutionally incapable of being on time, and I compensate." She laughed. The real one. Monday came, and Daniel was there at 7 with Ray Marcus and a newer guy named Pete, who was a 24, and worked hard, and didn't talk unless he had something to say, which Daniel considered an exceptional quality in a young person. Emily was already on site with 2 members of her own team. She introduced everyone with the same quiet efficiency Daniel remembered from the Maplewood project. Names, roles, specific responsibilities, no wasted words. The first house on the list belonged to a woman named Dorothy Haynes, 77 years old, who had lived there since 1974, and whose front porch had been condemned by the county the previous spring. Dorothy met them at the side. She couldn't use the front, wearing a house dress and a look of cautious hope that Daniel recognized from every renovation job he'd done for people who had been let down before. "You're really going to fix it," Dorothy said to Emily. "We're really going to fix it," Emily said. "Daniel here is going to assess the structural damage this morning and give us a timeline by afternoon." Dorothy looked at Daniel. He nodded. "We'll do it right, Ms. Dorothy." Dorothy looked at him, then at Emily. Something in her face shifted. "Okay," she said. "I made coffee if anybody wants it." Ray wanted it. Ray always wanted it. Dorothy poured him a cup in a mug that said, "World's Greatest Grandma," and Ray drank it with complete sincerity and told Dorothy it was the best coffee he'd had all week, which happened to be true. Daniel assessed the porch. It was worse than the photo. The supports had been rotting for at least 3 years. The decking was unsalvageable, and whoever had inspected the place for the county had been generous in calling it merely condemned rather than dangerous. He took photographs, measurements, made notes. Emily appeared beside him, at one point looked at his clipboard and said nothing because she could read a structural assessment and she already knew. 3 days minimum, he said. "I have 4 budgeted," she said. "Good, we'll need them." They stood side by side in Dorothy's yard looking at the house, and Emily said quietly, "She told me this morning that she hasn't been able to use her front door in 8 months. She has grandkids who visit, and they have to come around the side like they're sneaking in." Daniel looked at the condemned porch. looked at the front door behind it, a solid wooden door with a wreath on it clearly maintained, clearly a point of pride. "She'll use it by Thursday," he said. Emily looked at him. "Promise?" "I'll nail it myself if I have to," he said. She nodded. "Okay." Then softer. "Thank you." He was already walking back toward the truck for equipment. "You keep thanking me," he said over his shoulder. "You keep doing things worth thanking," she said. He didn't have an answer for that, so he picked up a toolbox. The pattern established itself, the way real things do not, by announcement, but by repetition. Weekday mornings. Daniel and his crew worked project sites. Emily coordinated from the field, moving between houses, managing materials and timelines, and the constant small crises that came with large-scale renovation work. They crossed paths throughout the day, exchanged information with the efficient shorthand of two people who'd already learned each other's working style, and occasionally ate lunch at the same folding table outside whichever house they were working on. In the evenings, more often than not, Emily came to Daniel's house. Not every night. She had her hotel, her own work to close out calls with project partners, her own life that existed parallel to his. But Tuesday nights, she came for dinner because Lily had negotiated this firmly on the first day. Thursday nights had developed into something unscheduled and organic. She'd drive over after her last call, and they'd sit on the porch or at the kitchen table and talk the way they'd started talking that second week of the Maplewood project when the walls were mostly down. Lily tracked all of this with the monitoring precision of a small intelligence agency. "She's here 4 times this week," Lily told Daniel on a Friday morning while he was making her school lunch. "She's working nearby," Daniel said. "She worked nearby last time and she lived here," Lily said. Daniel put a sandwich in a bag. "That was a different situation. She stayed for dinner 3 nights and came back Wednesday after dinner. She had paperwork to use the table for." Lily stared at him. "Dad." "Eat your breakfast," he said. "I'm just saying it's okay," Lily said. "I like when she's here. The house is better." He stopped, turned around, looked at his daughter. "The house is better," she said again, simply like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I didn't know what to do with that in the middle of making a school lunch on a Friday morning. So he finished the lunch, got her to the bus on time, and stood at the end of the driveway after the bus pulled away, and thought about the specific truth of what a 9-year-old had just said to him. The house is better. Yeah, he thought. It is. The twist came on a Wednesday, and it came from a direction he hadn't seen. He was at Dorothy Haynes's house. They'd finished the porch on Thursday as promised, and Dorothy had used her front door for the first time in 8 months, with a grandkid on each hand, while Daniel pretended to be busy with his toolbox, and Ray pretended not to be emotional, and failed when Emily called. Not texted. Called. He answered on the second ring. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," she said, but her voice was wrong. "Emily." A pause. "There's an opportunity," she said, "for the next project cycle. Western Regional Director position. It's been vacant for 8 months. The person who held it retired. My supervisor called this morning." Another pause. "The position is based in Charlotte." He didn't say anything for a moment. "It's a promotion," she said. "Significant one. Broader scope, more funding authority, more impact. Everything I've been working toward." A pause. "It would also mean I'm not field-based anymore. The project work, the site visits, the coordination, the on-the-ground stuff that becomes supervisory. I'd manage a team of coordinators instead of doing it myself." He understood what she wasn't saying. "You'd be in Charlotte?" "Yes." "Not in the field?" "Not regularly, no." He looked at the finished porch of Dorothy Haynes's house. The new boards, the repainted railing, the door with the wreath on it. "When do you have to decide?" he said. "End of the week," she said. "Daniel." "It's a good opportunity," he said. "I know it is. You'd be good at it." "I know that too." Her voice was quieter. "That's not the part I'm trying to figure out." "What part are you trying to figure out?" Silence on the line. "Emily," he said. "I like what we're doing," she said. "What's happening here? And I'm trying not to make a major career decision based on—" She stopped. Based on what? On something that might not. She stopped again. I understood then. She was protecting herself. The same way he'd protected himself for 6 years. Because she'd been the person people liked having around, and then chose not to choose, and she wasn't willing to bet a directorship on a man who hadn't made anything official, hadn't said anything definitive, hadn't given her a clear reason to count on him. He thought about the 6 years he'd spent in a smaller life. I thought about what it cost to keep protecting yourself from things that hadn't happened yet. Emily, he said, come here tonight. Daniel, it's Wednesday. I have... Come after your calls, he said. Whenever. Lily goes to bed at 9. Come after 9. Silence. Okay, she said. He went back to work. He didn't tell Ray anything. Ray watched him work for 20 minutes and then said, You want to tell me what happened? No, Daniel said. Okay, Ray said and handed him a nail.
John.
She knocked at 9:17. He opened the door and she came in, and he could see it on her, the careful composure, the internal calculation, the specific expression of a woman who had already decided 3 separate things and wasn't sure which one to act on. He recognized it now. He'd seen it on her face the first night in the hallway. He'd seen it every time she was bracing for something. Sit down, he said. Daniel. Please, he said. She sat. He sat across from her. He had thought about this for 8 hours, and he had decided that the only move was the honest one, so he was going to make it. You're trying to figure out whether taking a job in Charlotte means you're walking away from something real, he said. And you can't answer that question because I haven't given you enough information to answer it. She looked at him. So I'm going to give you the information, he said. She was very still. I am not asking you to stay, he said. Charlotte is Charlotte. A directorship is a directorship. I would not ask you to pass on something that's yours because of this. He held her gaze. But I want you to know what this is, so you're making a real decision and not a scared one. She made a small sound. Not quite a word. This, he said, is the first time in 6 years I've been in a room with someone and not felt alone. This is my daughter drawing 3 stick figures and knowing something I was still working up to. This is me looking up the distance between my house and your project site because I wanted to know how long until I could see you again. He paused. This is real. It's real to me. And I should have said it clearly before now so you had all the information. She sat across from him, and her hands were flat on the table, and she was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen before. Not the composure, not the professional calm, not even the careful openness of their late-night conversations. This was something underneath all of it. This was Emily Carter without any of the armor, and she looked like someone who had been waiting a long time for exactly this sentence and didn't quite trust that she'd heard it right. Say that again, she said. Which part? The part about being real. He looked at her. This is real, Emily. You are not someone I like having around. You are someone I am choosing. Every day for the last 2 months, including the 6 weeks you were in Charlotte, I have been choosing you. I just hadn't said it in a way that made it clear. She looked at the table, then at him. Her jaw was working. I'm not easy, she said. I have opinions about everything. I reorganize things. I make my own decisions, and I don't ask for help until I absolutely have to. I push back. I take up space. I know, he said. I've been in the same house with you for weeks. I know exactly who you are. And I'm sitting here telling you you're someone I'm choosing. What does the "and" accomplish? She let out a breath. It shook at the edges. Okay, she said. Her voice was rough. Okay. Take the job, he said. She looked at him sharply. Take the job, he said again. Charlotte is 2.5 hours. I have a truck. You have a car. Lily has weekends, and I have more personal days than I've used in 3 years because I never went anywhere. He held her gaze. Take the job you've earned. I'll figure out the distance. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, he said. But it's not impossible. And pretending it's impossible so we don't have to try is just another word for a smaller life. He watched her recognize her own words. I'm done with smaller. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Charlotte is 2 hours and 22 minutes. "I know," he said. "I've driven it." She went completely still. "You've driven it?" "Twice," he said. "I had to see what it looked like." He paused. "Nice city. You drove to Charlotte and back twice without telling me." "I wasn't ready to tell you. I was still working up to this conversation." Something broke in her face. Not broke in a bad way, broke the way a knot releases, the way a thing that's been held tight finally lets go. She pressed both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders shook once. She was laughing. She dropped her hands, and there it was, the real laugh, the involuntary one, the one that left something open and warm afterward. "You drove to Charlotte twice," she said. "The interstate is very well maintained," he said. "I was impressed." She laughed again. The laugh became something else at the edges, a sound that was crying a little, or close to it, the way things that have been held too long sometimes come out mixed when they finally come out. She pressed the back of her hand to her face. "Daniel," she said, unsteady. "Yeah," he said. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright. "I'm going to take the job." "Good," he said. "And I'm going to come back here," she said. "As much as I can. As often as we can make it work." "Good," he said again. "And you're going to have to meet my friend Cora," she said. "She's known about you for 2 months and she's insufferable about it. She made me describe you in detail, and she said, and I'm quoting, "Emily, that man is in love with you." And I told her she was projecting." He looked at her. "Was she projecting?" Emily said. He looked at her across the kitchen table. This table, these chairs, this kitchen. And he thought about 6 years of protecting himself from the wrong things, and about a note folded against a stick figure drawing in his shirt pocket, and about a 9-year-old who had known before either of them was ready to say it. "No," he said. "She wasn't projecting." Emily looked at him. The bright in her eyes intensified. "Okay," she said. Barely a word. "Okay," he said. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then she said, "I should probably tell Cora she was right. She'll be unbearable, but it's the honest thing to do." "Tell her she was right," he said. She reached across the table, and her hand covered his on the tabletop. Her grip was solid and warm, and completely certain, the way Emily Carter did everything she'd actually decided on. He turned his hand over and held hers. They sat like that for a long time, not talking, not needing to the house quiet and full around them, the way a house feels when nothing important is missing from it anymore. The project wrapped on a Friday 3 weeks later. Daniel brought the whole crew, Ray, Marcus, Trey, Pete, to the final site. A house on the far end of the Caldwell district, where a man named William Pruitt, 83 years old, had been living without proper heating for 2 winters because the ductwork had failed, and he hadn't wanted to be a burden to anyone. His daughter had called the project hotline in September and cried on the phone to Emily's team coordinator for 20 minutes. Daniel replaced the ductwork personally. Took 2 days. He and Pete worked through the afternoon on the second day and got it running at 4:15, and when they tested it and warm air moved through William Pruitt's house for the first time in 2 winters, the old man stood in the middle of his living room and said nothing for a full 30 seconds. Then he said, "I forgot what that felt like." Daniel nodded. He did not trust his voice. William Pruitt shook his hand with both of his and said, "You're a good man." And then he went to put on the kettle because he said he wanted tea, and he hadn't been warm enough to enjoy tea in a long time. Daniel went outside and stood by his truck. Ray appeared beside him 2 minutes later. "You good?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "You're crying a little." "I am not." "You are a little." "It's cold out," Daniel said. "My eyes water." "It's 58 degrees, Ray said. "Go get your tools," Daniel said. Ray went to get his tools and said nothing else about it, which was the right call. Emily found Daniel by the truck. She had her clipboard. She always had the clipboard and her project closeout folder, and she stood beside him and looked at William Pruitt's house. 12 houses, she said. Done. 12 houses, he said. She was quiet for a moment. William told me this morning that his daughter hasn't stopped calling since she found out the heat was fixed. She paused. He said he picked up on the first ring. Daniel looked at the house. Good. He said he used to let it ring, Emily said, because he didn't want her to worry about him, and he didn't want to admit that he needed something. Daniel looked at her. She looked back at him. Sounds familiar? She said. Yeah, he said. It does. She leaned into his arm. He put his arm around her shoulder. They stood like that by his truck in front of William Pruitt's house, while the crew loaded equipment, and Ray very pointedly did not look at them. I put in the paperwork for the director position this morning, Emily said. Good, he said. I also talked to my landlord in Charlotte about my lease, she said. He looked at her. And, month to month, she said. Starting December 1st. She said it neutrally, but she was watching him, month to month. He absorbed this carefully. He did not want to read something into it that she hadn't meant. That's a flexible arrangement, he said. Yes, she said. Gives you options, he said. Yes, she said. It does. He looked at her steadily. Emily. Don't make me say it, she said. I just went month to month on my apartment lease. I think I've been sufficiently clear. He looked at her for a moment. Then, the guest room is fixed. I know, she said. You told me that the day I left. I'm telling you again, he said. The guest room is fixed, and it's been empty for 11 weeks. She tilted her head. I thought I was staying in the guest room. I thought you might want options, he said. Something shifted in her expression, warm, clear, without any armor at all. Let's see how December goes, she said. He nodded. Let's see how December goes. Ray appeared from the side of the truck with a toolbox and the expression of a man who had heard enough to be extremely pleased with himself. You two done? Because it's almost 5 and I have dinner plans. Get in the truck, Ray, Daniel said. Just asking, Ray said. Emily stepped back, still smiling. I'll follow you home, she said. I promised Lily I'd help with the history project. The Revolution project was done weeks ago, Daniel said. She started a new one, Emily said. Something about the Civil War. He looked at her. You know about this. She texted me, Emily said. 3 days ago. He shook his head. She texted you before she told me. She said she didn't want you to volunteer to help because, and I'm quoting, Dad always gets the dates wrong. Ray burst out laughing. It was immediate and total and completely uncontrolled. Get in the truck, Ray, Daniel said. He walked around to the driver's side. He got in. He started the engine. He watched in the mirror as Emily walked to her car, still smiling, clipboard under her arm, her hair moving in the October wind. He thought about a woman in a rainstorm on his porch. He thought about a hallway question that was 2 questions at once. He thought about a stick figure with curly hair and a note folded next to it, both still in his shirt pocket after all these weeks. He put the truck in reverse. Ray was already on his phone texting someone, grinning like he'd won something. Not a word, Daniel said. I haven't said anything, Ray said. Keep it that way. Ray looked up from his phone. He had the expression of a man who had watched his best friend spend 6 years in a smaller life and was watching him drive away from it. She's good for you, he said. Simple, honest. Daniel watched Emily's car pull out behind him in the mirror. Yeah, he said. She is. He drove home. For the first time in 6 years, the house at the end of the driveway didn't look like something he was returning to. It looked like somewhere he was going. Emily's first month as Western Regional Director was the kind of month that reminded her why she had wanted the job in the first place, and simultaneously tested every reason she'd had. She was in back-to-back meetings by 7:30 every morning. She was managing 4 project coordinators across 3 counties, a budget cycle that had been mismanaged by the previous director for 18 months, and a board of regional stakeholders who had opinions about everything and authority over very little, but didn't know the difference. She ate lunch at her desk more often than not. She left the office after 7 on most nights. And she called Daniel every single evening, not because she had planned to, not because they had agreed to a schedule. It had happened naturally the way, Real things happen. She'd called him the first night because something at work had gone sideways, and she needed to hear a voice that wasn't performing anything, and he'd answered on the second ring, and they'd talked for an hour, and the next night he'd called her, and after that, it was just a thing they did. 7:30, 8 o'clock, whenever the day finally let them go. She'd be in her Charlotte apartment, he'd be in his kitchen after Lily was in bed, and they'd talk. About everything. About nothing. About William Pruitt. And whether the heating system had made it through its first cold snap, Daniel had called to check. About the project coordinator on Emily's team, who reminded her of herself at 26, and was about to burn out if nobody intervened. Emily had taken her to lunch and said the things nobody had said to her at 26, and the woman had cried into her soup and said thank you. About Lily's Civil War project, which had received a B+, and Lily's firm opinion that the teacher had made an error in judgment. She wrote a note to the teacher, Daniel said one evening in November. What kind of note? Emily said. A polite note, professionally worded, making her case. A pause. It was 3 paragraphs. Emily pressed her hand over her mouth. She showed it to me before she turned it in, he said. I read it, and I thought I know exactly who taught her that. I never told her to write a note to her teacher. No, he said. But you write notes to people when you think they've made an error in judgment. She's been watching you. A pause. The teacher gave her a B++, which is not a real grade, but I think it was the best she could do under the circumstances. Emily laughed until she couldn't breathe. When she stopped, she was sitting on her apartment floor, with her back against the couch, and the Charlotte apartment around her felt very empty, in a way that had nothing to do with furniture, and everything to do with the specific absence of the voices she'd gotten used to filling a house. I miss Lily, she said. She misses you, Daniel said. She informed me this morning that you're better at explaining fractions than I am. I explained fractions once. Apparently once was enough. She turned her head and looked at the window. Charlotte outside city lights the ordinary distance of 2 hours and 22 minutes. I'm coming up Friday, she said. I know, he said. Lily already has a list. Of what? Things she wants to show you. I've seen the list. It's extensive. How extensive? She has it organized into categories, he said. Emily smiled in her empty apartment. Tell her I'll be there by 4. She'll hold you to that, he said. Good, she said. She should. December arrived and brought with it the particular cold of western North Carolina, not brutal, but serious, the kind that made the morning commute unpleasant and the evenings worth staying in for. Daniel had cut a new piece of firewood every other day since mid-November, which Lily had pointed out was excessive, and which Daniel had defended on the grounds of being prepared. Emily came up every other weekend. Sometimes she drove Friday night after work 2 hours and 22 minutes. She had the route memorized by now, knew exactly where the construction on I-40 slowed things down, and which exit had the best gas station. Sometimes she came Saturday morning. She always stayed through Sunday. She slept in the guest room, which was fine, which was what they'd agreed, which was comfortable and uncomplicated and allowed everyone to move at a pace that didn't feel rushed. This was the agreement. The agreement lasted until the 3rd weekend in December. It was a Saturday night late, and Lily had been asleep for 2 hours. Emily and Daniel were at the kitchen table. They were always at the kitchen table. It was the center of gravity of this house, and they were talking about nothing in particular and everything real, the way they always talked when the day was done and nobody was performing anything. Emily said in the middle of a sentence about something else entirely, I looked at real estate listings. Daniel stopped. In the Asheville area, she said, evenly, like it was a normal sentence. He looked at her. Tell me about the listings. She looked at her coffee mug. There's a place on Mercer Street, 3 bedrooms. It needs work. The kitchen is outdated, and there's an issue with the drainage on the south side of the property that would need to be addressed before winter gets worse. She paused. The porch is in good condition. He was very still. My lease in Charlotte is month to month, she said. I've been month to month for 6 weeks. I remember, he said. I can do this job from anywhere with a good internet connection, she said. The board meetings are in Asheville twice a month. The project sites are within the western region. She kept her eyes on the mug. Charlotte made sense when I was field-based. Now it's just where I happen to be. Emily, he said. She looked up. Are you telling me you want to move to Asheville? He said. She held his gaze. I'm looking at a house on Mercer Street that needs drainage work and a kitchen update, and someone who knows what they're doing to assess the structural soundness before I make an offer. He looked at her for a long moment. I know someone, he said. She exhaled. I thought you might. It's 14 minutes from here, he said. I know how far it is, she said. You looked that up. Obviously I looked that up. He leaned back in his chair, looked at the ceiling for a second, looked back at her. When can I see it? The listing agent can do a walkthrough Monday morning, she said. But I'd want your assessment before I talk to her seriously. It doesn't make sense to fall in love with a house that has foundation issues. He looked at her. No, he said quietly. It doesn't. She met his eyes. They both knew they weren't only talking about the house. Sunday, he said. I'll drive by Sunday and tell you what I can see from the outside. If it looks solid, I'll call the agent Monday. She nodded. Okay. Okay, he said. Neither of them mentioned the guest room again that night. But when Emily went down the hall at midnight, she paused at the door and looked back at him. Daniel, she said. He was still at the table. Thank you, she said, for not making this a bigger thing than it needs to be. It's a house, he said. It's not just a house, she said. I know, he said, which is why I'm not making it a bigger thing than it needs to be. He held her gaze. Get some sleep. We'll figure the rest out. She looked at him for one more second. Then she went to bed. He sat at the kitchen table for another 20 minutes, thinking about a woman who had knocked on his door in a rainstorm and was now looking at houses 14 minutes away, and the specific quiet miracle of how one thing becomes another when you stop being afraid of it. Sunday morning, Daniel drove past the Mercer Street house before anyone else was awake. He sat in his truck across the street and looked at it the way he looked at all structures professionally, analytically, without sentiment. 2 stories. Brick exterior in good condition. The roof looked like it had been replaced within the last 5 years. The drainage issue Emily had mentioned was visible. The grade of the yard tilted slightly toward the foundation on the south side, which would need correction before the spring rains. The kitchen windows were small, which meant the kitchen was probably darker than it should be. But the bones of the house, the lines of it, the way it sat on the property, were solid. He sat there for 10 minutes. Then he drove home and made coffee, and when Emily came downstairs at 7:30, he said, "The bones are good. The drainage is fixable. 2 days of work, maybe 3. Kitchen will need a gut renovation, but the structure is sound enough to handle it." He paused. "It's a good house." Emily was holding her coffee mug with both hands. "You drove past it this morning." "I needed to see it in daylight." "It's 7:30 on a Sunday. I'm a morning person," he said. She looked at him. "Did you do measurements?" He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, set it on the table. She stared at it. "You got out of the truck." The drain issue needed a closer look. She unfolded the paper. It was a hand-drawn sketch of the property, accurate, detailed, with measurements and notes in Daniel's precise handwriting. She read it for a full minute. Then she looked up at him. "You drew the whole south elevation." "It's where the problem is," he said. "Daniel, this is—" She stopped. Her voice had something in it that she was working to keep steady. "You did this before 7 in the morning on a Sunday because you wanted me to have the information. You make decisions better when you have complete information," he said. "I know that about you." She looked at the sketch, then at him. "I'm calling the agent Monday," she said. Her voice was very quiet, but very certain. "I'll go with you," he said. "You don't have to." "Emily," he said. "I want to go with you." She looked at him across the table. "Okay," she said. "Monday." The twist that Daniel had not seen coming arrived the following Thursday, and it arrived in the form of his mother-in-law, Patricia Dawson. Sarah's mother was 68 years old and drove a Buick and had opinions she delivered without preamble. She had been part of Daniel and Lily's life since the accident, consistently reliably, with the particular devotion of a woman who had lost her daughter, and transferred the full weight of that love onto the granddaughter and son-in-law who remained. She came for Sunday dinners twice a month. She came to every one of Lily's school events. She had never once in 6 years suggested to Daniel that he should move on, should date, should consider his own life. She called him on a Thursday afternoon. He was at a job site. He stepped away from the crew. "Patricia," he said. "Lily told me about Emily," she said. He went still. He had not told Lily not to tell Patricia. It hadn't occurred to him that he needed to. Lily was 9. Lily told Patricia everything with the same faithful regularity she applied to morning weather updates. "Patricia," he started. "Don't apologize," she said before he could get any further. Her voice was flat in a way that didn't tell him what was underneath. "I want to meet her." He moved further from the crew. "Okay." "Lily says she's kind," Patricia said. "Lily says she helped with the history project, and she knows how to explain fractions, and she hugs properly." A pause. "Those are Lily's words. Hugs properly." "That sounds like Lily," he said. "Lily also says she makes eggs better than you do." "That's true," he said. Silence on the line. "Daniel," Patricia said. Her voice had changed. The flatness was gone, and what was underneath it was something he hadn't been prepared for. "I'm going to say something and I need you to let me finish." "Okay," he said. His chest was tight. "Sarah would be furious at you," Patricia said. "For 6 years, for all of it. She would be so angry that you sat in that house and convinced yourself that small was enough." A pause. Her voice was unsteady now. "She loved you, and she would be livid that you treated her death like it meant your life was over." Another pause. "She told me once we were talking one of those late-night talks, she said, 'Mom, if anything ever happened to me, I'd want Daniel to be happy. Really happy. Not fine. Happy.' She said it very specifically because she knew you. She knew you'd try to be fine and call it enough." Daniel was standing in the cold on a job site, and his eyes were burning, and he pressed his hand over them. "Patricia," he said. His voice didn't work right. "I want to meet Emily," Patricia said firmly. "I want to have her to Sunday dinner, this Sunday." He took a breath. "I'll ask her." "Lily already texted her," Patricia said. He pulled the phone from his ear, stared at it, put it back. "Lily texted her. 20 minutes ago, Emily said she would be honored. Those were her exact words." A small pause. "I liked her answer." He pressed his hand over his face again. "Daniel," Patricia said gentler. "Be happy, that's all. Just be happy." He didn't trust his voice enough to say anything. "Sunday dinner," Patricia said. 6 o'clock. I'm making pot roast." She hung up. He stood on the job site for a full 3 minutes before he went back to work, and Ray took one look at him and wordlessly handed him a cup of coffee from the thermos and said nothing. Sunday dinner at Patricia's house there was no other word for it complete. Emily had brought flowers. She had also somehow known to bring the specific brand of coffee Patricia preferred, which she had apparently learned from Lily via text over the course of 3 days of research that Daniel had known nothing about. Patricia had opened the door and looked at Emily. Really looked at her. The full, unguarded assessment of a woman who was measuring something important. And then she had taken the coffee from Emily's hands and said, "Come in, you can help me with the bread." Daniel had stood in the doorway, watching his mother-in-law lead Emily into the kitchen, and Lily had tugged his hand and said, "She likes her dad," with absolute confidence. "How do you know?" he said. "She asked her to help with the bread," Lily said. "She only asks people she likes to help with the bread." He had no reason to doubt this logic. The dinner was 2.5 hours long. Patricia asked Emily questions, not interrogation. Genuine curiosity. The interest of a woman who wanted to know who was in her granddaughter's life. Emily answered everything directly without softening or performing. And she asked Patricia questions back. About Sarah. About the early years. About what Patricia remembered most. Daniel watched Patricia's face when Emily asked about Sarah. He had been braced for something: tension, grief, defensiveness. Instead, Patricia's face had opened. She had talked about Sarah for 20 minutes. Real things. Funny things. The specific textures of a person who had been fully known and fully loved. And Emily had listened, the way she listened to everything completely, without rushing, without trying to fill the space with anything other than attention. After dinner, Lily dragged Patricia into the living room for some project-related reason, and Daniel was helping Emily clear the table when Patricia appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked at Emily. "My daughter was extraordinary," she said. Not a question, not a preamble. Emily went still. "I know," she said. "Daniel's told me." Patricia nodded. "She would have liked you," she said. "You remind me of her a little, not in your face, in the way you're in a room." Emily's jaw moved. Thank you. That means everything." Patricia looked at her for another moment. Then she looked at Daniel. Then she turned and went back to the living room. Daniel looked at Emily. Emily looked at her hands. She set down the dish she was holding very carefully. She was holding herself together with the specific concentration of someone who was not going to cry in someone else's kitchen and had made a firm decision about this. "Hey," he said. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was completely steady. Her eyes were completely bright. "Emily, I'm fine." She picked the dish back up. "Help me with the table." He helped her with the table. And when their hands were both full and they were moving around each other in Patricia's kitchen, he said quietly, "You're not just someone I chose. You're someone everyone who matters to me chose too." She stopped moving. She stood with a stack of plates in her hands and looked at him. "Daniel Whitmore," she said. Her voice was rough. "Yeah," he said. "If you make me cry in Patricia's kitchen, I will never forgive you." "Then hold it together," he said. "The dish rack is to your left." She laughed. The laugh came out a little broken and completely real. She set the plates in the rack. She pressed the back of her wrist to her eye. She turned back to the table. He watched her and thought, there you are. The whole of you. Right here. The Mercer Street house closed on the 15th of January. Emily signed the papers on a Tuesday morning with Daniel sitting beside her, and a real estate agent who was very professional and kept glancing between them with the fond expression of someone who could see exactly what this was. Afterward, in the parking lot, Emily stood beside her car and held the keys and looked at them for a long moment. Daniel stood next to her. "You okay?" he said. "I bought a house," she said. "You bought a house," he said. "In Asheville, North Carolina." She turned the keys over in her hand. "I moved my entire life to a town outside Asheville, North Carolina, because a ceiling leaked." He looked at her. "Because a stranger let you in out of the rain." She looked at him. "Because a stranger let me in out of the rain," she agreed. Her voice was quieter now. "Because he said come in when every practical reason said to say no." "I'm not known for practicality," he said. "You literally drew a property sketch at 6 in the morning on a Sunday," she said. "That's practical," he said. "That's information gathering." She shook her head, a smile. "You're impossible." "You bought a house 14 minutes from mine," he said. "You could have stayed in Charlotte." She looked at the keys, then at him. "I didn't want to stay in Charlotte," she said simply. "I wanted to be here." She looked up. "Near you, near Lily, near Patricia and her pot roast and Ray's terrible jokes and the crew and Dorothy's front porch and William Pruitt's heat." She pressed her lips together. "I wanted to be in a place that felt like something was happening, not just existing." He looked at her for a moment. Then he reached out and took the hand that was holding the keys, not the keys, her hand, and held it. "Welcome home," he said. She looked at him, bright and clear and completely without armor. "Home," she said, like she was testing the word, like she was deciding whether it fit. It fit. The renovation on Mercer Street started the following Saturday. Daniel brought Ray, Marcus, and Pete. He did not tell Emily he was bringing a full crew. He had mentioned he would take a look and start on the drainage, and she had said she would be there at 9 with coffee. She arrived at 8:50 to find 4 trucks in her driveway and a crew already working the south side grade with equipment she had not expected. She stood at the edge of the driveway with a carrier of coffees in her hands, looking at the operation. Ray was the first to notice her. "Morning," he said entirely too cheerfully. "Ray," she said. She looked at Daniel. "I said you'd look at the drainage." "I looked at it," he said. "Then I called the guys." "Daniel, the grade needed to be corrected before the next rain system," he said, "which is coming Wednesday. If we wait until next weekend, we're looking at moisture damage to the foundation before you've even moved in." She stared at him. "You checked the forecast." "It's a practical decision," he said. "You're doing it again," she said. "Doing what?" "Taking care of things I didn't ask you to take care of." He looked at her. "Do you want me to stop?" She stood with the coffee carrier and looked at the crew working her yard, and looked at the house that was hers now, and looked at the man who had driven past it at 6 in the morning on a Sunday to make sure the bones were good before she fell in love with it. "No," she said. "Don't stop." She handed him a coffee. He took it. Their hands overlapped for a moment on the cup. She went to give the rest of the coffees to the crew, and she remembered each person's order correctly without asking, because she had listened the first time, and she always remembered, and Ray accepted his cup with the expression of a man who had never doubted this would work out. "She's good," Ray said to Daniel very quietly as she walked toward Marcus and Pete. "I know," Daniel said. "She's really good." "Ray." "I'm just confirming what you already know," Ray said. "Get back to work," Daniel said. Lily saw the house for the first time on a Sunday afternoon in late January, and she walked through every room with the focused attention of an inspector and the enthusiasm of someone who had been looking forward to this for months. She stood in the middle of the 3rd bedroom, the smallest one, the one with the good light, and said, "This could be my room." Daniel looked at her sharply. "You have a room." "When I stay over," Lily said with the ease of someone clarifying something obvious. "I'm going to stay over sometimes. I need a room." Emily was standing in the doorway. Daniel couldn't see her face from where he stood. "You think Emily wants you staying over?" Daniel said. "Emily already said yes," Lily said. He turned to look at Emily. Emily's expression was entirely composed. "She asked me very formally," Emily said. "By text, on Wednesday. I said yes." "She asked you before she told me," Daniel said. "I noticed," Emily said. "I didn't want Dad to overthink it," Lily said reasonably. "He overthinks things." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Emily laughed, the real one, the involuntary one, and Lily looked satisfied, and Daniel looked at the ceiling of the 3rd bedroom and thought about the particular and specific ways a 9-year-old could simultaneously delight and unravel him. "She's right," Emily said. "You overthink things." "I drew a property sketch at 6 in the morning, he said. "That's not overthinking, that's preparation." "Dad," Lily said, "can this be my room?" He looked at his daughter. He looked at Emily in the doorway. He thought about everything that had begun with a storm and a knocked door, and a woman who refused to look anything other than capable, and everything that had unfolded from that moment into this one. This room, this house, this life that was building itself in a direction he hadn't planned for and wouldn't trade for anything. "Yeah, Bug," he said. "That can be your room." Lily pumped her fist. February came, and Emily moved in on a Saturday, which meant Daniel and the crew moved her in on a Saturday, which Emily had specifically said she did not need, and which Daniel had done anyway, because he could not watch someone he loved carry boxes alone when he had 4 guys with trucks available. She had said the word herself on the phone 3 weeks earlier, talking about something else entirely. She had said, "I love the way you never make me feel like a problem to be managed." And then she'd said very quietly, "And I love you." And then she'd kept talking as if she hadn't said it, as if the sentence had slipped out naturally, and she wasn't going to make it complicated by stopping. He had let her finish whatever she was saying. And then he had said Emily, and she had said, "I know you don't have to." And he had said, "I love you," clearly. No qualifications. She had been quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then, "Okay. Then good." Then they had kept talking. It was the least dramatic declaration either of them had ever been part of, and it was absolutely perfect, and neither of them felt the need to revisit it, because the word had found its place and settled there and didn't require ceremony. Moving day was loud and efficient, and punctuated by Ray making comments about furniture placement that nobody asked for, and Lily directing box carrying with a clipboard she had made herself. She had made a clipboard with a real paper list attached, because she had been watching Emily for months and had absorbed the lesson completely. Marcus had called her the boss, and she had accepted this as her due. By 3 in the afternoon, the furniture was in the boxes were stacked, and the crew had been fed sandwiches that Emily had ordered with everyone's preferences correct, and they were gone by 4. Daniel stayed. Emily stood in her living room surrounded by her things in their new places, and she turned around slowly once looking at it. "It's real," she said. "It's real," he said. She turned to him. "This whole thing is real." "Yeah," he said. "It is." She crossed the room and put her hands on either side of his face and looked at him directly, completely, without any of the practiced composure or the careful distance. Just Emily in her house in her life, looking at the man who had said, "Come in out of the rain," when every practical reason said otherwise. "You changed everything," she said. "You know that one decision. One open door." Her hands were warm against his face. "You let me in, and nothing has been the same since." He put his hands over hers. "You did the same thing," he said. "You knocked. You answered. You stood there in the rain and refused to look like you needed saving," he said. "That was you. I just opened the door." She looked at him for a moment. Her eyes were very bright. "I love you," she said. Simple, clear, no ceremony required. "I love you," he said. She kissed him. It was quiet and certain the way Emily Carter did everything she had actually decided on, without hesitation, without qualification, completely. Outside, the February cold was doing what February cold does. Inside, the house was warm. They were surrounded by boxes and furniture, and the beginning of a life that neither of them had planned, and both of them had chosen, with everything they had. 3 weeks later, Daniel found the note. He was cleaning out his truck, long overdue, deeply necessary, and he reached into the breast pocket of a work jacket he hadn't worn since October. His hand found paper. He pulled it out. 2 pieces folded together. He unfolded them. The first was Lily's drawing. 3 stick figures, tall, small, and one with curly hair and a smile wider than its face. He had carried it for months. The second was Emily's note from the morning she'd left after the Maplewood project. The one on the project notepad. "I noticed. Thank you for folding it and keeping it. E." He stood in his driveway with both pieces of paper in his hand. He thought about the night she had knocked on his door. He thought about the hallway question. He thought about 6 years of a smaller life, and the storm that had interrupted it, and the woman who had refused to look helpless and had instead changed everything. He took out his phone and called Emily. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said. She was at her desk. He could hear the particular quiet of her home office. "Everything okay?" "I found the drawing," he said. "And your note, in my jacket pocket." Silence. "I've been carrying them since September," he said. She didn't say anything for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful and warm. "I know," she said. "I saw the pocket. The same pocket. Every day." A pause. "I've been waiting to see if you'd ever take them out." He stood in his driveway holding 2 pieces of paper. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because," she said, "some things don't need to be said. They just need to be known." He looked at the drawings, at Lily's 3 stick figures, at the curly hair. "Emily," he said. "Yeah. Come for dinner tonight," he said. "Daniel, I live 14 minutes away. I'm here 4 nights a week." "Come tonight," he said. "Lily wants to show you something she found in my workshop." "What did she find?" "I don't know," he said. "But she texted me about it at 9 this morning." Emily laughed. "She texted me about it at 8:45. He shook his head. "What did she say?" "She said, and I'm quoting exactly, 'Emily, come for dinner. Dad found something important, and I think it means something big is happening." A pause. "Is something big happening, Daniel?" He looked at the 2 pieces of paper in his hand. He looked at his house. He thought about everything it had taken to get from that stormy evening to this ordinary afternoon in February, and how nothing about it had been small, even the parts that looked small from the outside. He thought about a man who had opened a door, a woman who had knocked, a child who had drawn what she saw long before the adults were ready to see it. He thought about Patricia saying, "Be happy, just be happy." About Dorothy using her front door with grandkids on each hand. About William Pruitt standing in his warm house saying, "I forgot what that felt like." About Ray grinning in a truck cab at the end of a workday. About the guest room fixed and waiting. About a suitcase that came back, not because there was nowhere else to go, but because this was where she wanted to be. He thought about every door he had almost not opened. I was never going to be grateful enough that he had. "Yeah," he said. "I think something big is happening." She was quiet for a moment. "I'll be there at 6, she said. Her voice was steady and warm and completely certain. "Don't burn dinner." "I'm getting better at that," he said. "You are," she said. "You really are." He put the phone in his pocket. He folded the 2 pieces of paper carefully, the drawing, the note, and he did not put them back in his jacket. He went inside and opened the kitchen drawer where he kept the things that mattered, the things he needed to be able to put his hands on. He placed both pieces of paper inside. He closed the drawer. He started dinner. At 5:58, headlights swept across the kitchen window. At 5:59, there was a knock at the front door. He crossed the hallway and opened it. Emily Carter stood on his porch, not in a storm this time, not desperate, not soaking wet with nowhere to go. She stood there in the February evening with her jacket on and her hair down and the particular expression she wore when she was exactly where she had decided to be. She had a bottle of wine in one hand. "You're early," he said. "I know how far 14 minutes is," she said. He stepped aside. She walked in. He closed the door behind her. And the house that had been quiet for 6 years, with a particular kind of emptiness that had nothing to do with how full it was settled around them, with the specific unmistakable warmth of a place where nothing important is missing. Some doors, when you open them, change everything on the other side of your life. Daniel Whitmore had learned that on a stormy evening in a small town outside Asheville, when a stranger knocked and he said, "Come in," and the word that had felt like a small thing turned out to be the biggest thing he had ever said. Emily Carter had learned it too, that the life you build when you stop being afraid of what you need is the only life that ever feels like yours. And Lily had known it from the beginning, the way children know things before adults are ready to admit them, drawn in careful crayon on a kitchen table with 3 stick figures and a smile wider than its face. The door had opened. The woman had come in. And not one of them was ever the same again. Not in the way that